The ship was enormous. It drifted quietly through the stars, a metal giant against the vast darkness of space. Kara, a young Zunxan warrior, stood on the observation deck, watching the new arrivals with a mix of curiosity and disdain. The humans had come. She had heard the stories, their tiny, fragile bodies, their soft skin, their weak hearts. Yet there was something in the way the humans had been talked about that intrigued her. The other species feared them. The humans had something that made even the bravest hesitate. Kara wasn't afraid. She was a warrior, raised on a world where strength was everything. Fear was a luxury, but even so she couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to these humans than anyone realized. A loud cheer echoed down the hallways as the human delegation stepped onto the ship. Kara turned her gaze from the stars and walked toward the crowd. She wasn't sure what she expected, but the sight of Jake Sanders, a human among a crowd of his kind, immediately caught her attention. He was tall for a human, though still short by Zunxan standards, and he wore a strange, ragged outfit. His messy brown hair stuck out in every direction like he had just rolled out of bed, and his eyes were bright with a mix of excitement and uncertainty. He was surrounded by alien leaders, their alien faces twisted in amusement or pity. But Jake didn't seem bothered by their stares. He was looking at them as if they were the strange ones, not him. That made Kara smile despite herself. "Well, this is awkward," Jake said, breaking the silence. His voice was smooth, but there was an edge to it, like he was used to talking his way out of uncomfortable situations. "I'm guessing this isn't the kind of first date you had in mind." Kara raised an eyebrow, slightly taken aback by his boldness. This human was different. "You think this is a date?" she asked, her voice filled with amusement. Jake grinned, clearly not intimidated. "I don't know, you tell me. You're the one who looks like you want to dissect me." She blinked. That wasn't what she expected. His casual attitude was unlike anything she had encountered before, and it stirred something inside her, a curiosity she couldn't ignore. "I'm not here to dissect anyone," Kara replied, her tone slightly defensive. "I'm Kara, and you are." "Jake," he said with a grin, offering his hand, which seemed almost comically small in comparison to hers. Jake Sanders, human, adventurer, and probably the only human who thinks standing on this ship is the least bit exciting. Kara studied his outstretched hand, wondering why, despite the strange feeling in her chest, she felt compelled to shake it. She reached out, her fingers brushing against his. His touch was warm, almost electric, and she quickly pulled her hand back, masking the sudden heat in her cheeks. "A human adventurer," Kara repeated. "I thought humans were fragile. You look fragile." Jake chuckled. "Well, I get that a lot, but I've survived more than you'd think. We're a resourceful species." His voice was full of humor, but there was an honesty in it that struck her. Kara felt her eyebrows furrow slightly. "Resourceful, huh? I guess we'll see about that." Jake's grin widened. "You'll find out soon enough, I'm sure. They said this ship was full of dangerous alien species, and I'll admit I'm a little curious. So far, though, the Zunxans don't seem so tough." He shot her a teasing glance, as if challenging her to prove him wrong. She tilted her head slightly, watching him closely. "I'm not sure you're ready to find out what a Zunxan can do." Jake's eyes sparkled. "I've faced worse than a few Zunxans, trust me." Kara's heartbeat quickened for a moment, but she masked it with a dry smile. "You talk big for someone so small." "I'm small but mighty," Jake said, a wink in his eyes that made Kara feel something unfamiliar. What was that? Her mind raced, and for a moment she felt something strange stir inside her, something that had nothing to do with being a warrior. She was a Zunxan, born to lead and to fight. She shouldn't be feeling this pull toward a human. He was weak, fragile. Everything about him was a stark contrast to everything she knew. And yet there was something in the way he carried himself, something in the way he spoke with that impossible confidence that made her want to understand him more. He wasn't what she had been told. He wasn't fragile. "Maybe you're right," Kara said slowly, her voice softened. Maybe you're not so small after all." Jake's grin widened and she couldn't help but notice how his eyes lit up when he smiled. "I knew you'd come around," he teased. "But don't worry, Kara. I'll try not to let it go to my head." Her lips twitched. She wasn't sure what it was about him, but she found herself liking him more than she should. There was something about his lightheartedness that drew her in, even though she knew better. She had always believed in strength, true strength, the kind that could crush any enemy, but Jake was different. His strength wasn't physical, not in the way she was used to seeing. It was something else, something deeper. "Maybe you're not as bad as I thought," Kara said, feeling a strange sense of vulnerability creeping into her voice. Jake raised an eyebrow. "Maybe I'm better than you thought." Kara's heart beat faster at the playful challenge in his eyes. She didn't know why, but she wanted to see what this human was made of. She wanted to know him, beyond the stories, beyond the rumors. For the first time since she had stepped onto this ship, Kara felt a spark of something she hadn't felt in a long time. And that spark only grew stronger with every passing second. The days that followed were a whirlwind for Kara. She had never been one to lose focus, especially not on something as trivial as a human, but there was something about Jake that kept pulling her in. He was always around, always talking, always making light of situations that should have been serious. But despite his playful attitude, there was something real about him, something raw and unguarded that made her want to figure him out. And it wasn't just his charm. No, there was something else, something that seemed to hang in the air around him, something Kara couldn't quite put her finger on. It wasn't until one evening when they found themselves alone in the ship's common area that she finally noticed what it was. They were sitting on opposite ends of a table, the stars outside twinkling through the windows. Kara, as usual, was lost in thought, her mind racing with the endless duties of a Zunxan warrior. But Jake was humming to himself, tapping a rhythm on the table, clearly oblivious to the weight of their mission or the seriousness of their situation. Kara watched him for a moment, but then there it was, that scent. A faint, almost sweet fragrance that seemed to drift in the air whenever Jake was nearby. It was subtle at first, barely noticeable, but as she inhaled deeply, it filled her senses. It wasn't just any scent. It was distinctly human, and it was intoxicating. She froze, her breath catching in her throat. No, it can't be. She had never smelled anything like it before. The Zunxans didn't have scents like this, not the kind that stirred something inside her chest. It wasn't just the smell. It was the way it seemed to seep into her every thought, distracting her in a way that she had never experienced. Jake looked up at her, sensing the change in the air. "You okay there, Kara?" he asked, his voice a little more serious than usual. Kara blinked rapidly, shaking off the momentary confusion. I'm fine," she said, though she didn't quite believe it herself. Her eyes shifted back to him, and for a moment it was like everything else in the room faded away. It was just him, just the scent, and her. "You sure?" Jake asked, his tone teasing but with a hint of concern. "I've never seen a Zunxan look like they smelled something strange before." Kara's lips tightened, her cheeks growing slightly warm as she tried to focus on anything but the storm of feelings brewing inside her. "It's just nothing," she said quickly, looking away. Jake didn't seem convinced. He tilted his head, studying her with those piercing human eyes. "You know, I'm starting to think that 'nothing' is a word you use when you're trying to hide something." Kara wanted to argue, wanted to remind him that she was a warrior, not some soft-hearted fool. But as she looked at him, the same warmth that had filled her chest earlier began to spread again, and for the first time in a long while, she felt a sense of vulnerability she couldn't quite control. "It's just," Kara began, trailing off. She glanced up at him, her voice quieter now. "I've never smelled anything like that before." Jake raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued. "Smelled what?" Kara hesitated for a moment, unsure how to explain the sensation. "You," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Your scent, it's different, it's human, but it's more than that." Jake blinked, then let out a short laugh, though there was a hint of nervousness in it. That's the first time anyone's ever said my scent was more than just human. You sure you're not going crazy over there, Kara? Kara's heart skipped a beat. Did she just say that out loud? She quickly cleared her throat, forcing herself to meet his eyes. It's not that, she insisted, but her voice wavered. It's just, you're unlike anyone I've met before, and that scent, it's making me confused. Jake leaned back in his chair, a playful grin tugging at the corners of his lips. Well, I don't think you're crazy, Kara. In fact, I think I'm starting to get used to this whole alien warrior thing. You're not so bad, you know. She scowled, though it wasn't as harsh as it would have been with anyone else. You have a strange way of making things tolerable human. Jake's grin widened. I try. But then, as if sensing that there was more to the conversation than he had realized, his expression softened. Hey, I didn't mean to make things awkward. I just think there's something about you. Something real, you know. Kara blinked at the unexpected honesty in his voice. She had always been the one who kept her emotions hidden behind her armor, the one who never showed weakness. But here he was, a human, saying exactly what he felt, without hesitation, without fear. A small part of her wondered if he was right. Could it be? Could it be that in this strange universe with all its galaxies and aliens, there was something between them, something real? Before she could answer, an alarm suddenly blared through the ship, shaking them both out of the moment. Kara stood up quickly, her body instantly alert. We need to go, she said, her warrior instincts kicking in. There's something happening. Jake looked up at her, his grin gone. What's going on? There's been an intrusion. I don't know how they got past our defenses, but we need to move now. Without another word, Kara grabbed his arm and pulled him toward the exit. Despite the urgency of the situation, she couldn't help but notice how his touch lingered in her mind, like the scent she couldn't quite shake. He was human, fragile maybe, but in this moment he didn't feel weak. He felt strong, and for some strange reason she found herself hoping that whatever was coming, they would face it together. Stay close, Kara said, her voice sharp, but there was a softness to it now, a softness she hadn't meant to show. Jake didn't argue. I've got your back, Kara. She glanced at him, the words he'd said echoing in her mind. Good, she whispered, just before they stepped into the chaos of the ship. The universe was unpredictable, but as long as Jake was by her side, Kara felt ready for whatever came next. The alarms blared louder now, a constant, high-pitched shriek that filled the corridors of the ship. Kara and Jake sprinted through the dimly lit halls, their footsteps echoing as they raced toward the control room. Kara's mind was focused, the warrior within her taking over. There was no time for hesitation, no time for anything but the mission. She had been trained for this, prepared for the worst. But with Jake by her side, everything felt different. Jake kept pace easily, despite being human and obviously less suited for the ship's harsh conditions. He was agile and quick, but it wasn't his physical skills that impressed Kara. It was how he never hesitated to jump in and take action. Even now, as alarms screamed and danger loomed, Jake was there, by her side, ready to face whatever came. You sure you can handle this? Kara asked over her shoulder, a teasing edge in her voice. She wasn't worried. She was never worried about herself. But for some reason, she found herself wondering if Jake was ready for what they were about to face. Please, Jake said with a grin, his eyes sparkling with that mix of confidence and humor she was quickly growing fond of. I've dealt with worse than a few alien invaders. You forget, I'm a pro at this kind of thing. Kara rolled her eyes but couldn't stop the smile that tugged at her lips. You're insane. Maybe, Jake replied, shrugging. But I've never been one to back down from a challenge, especially not with a Zunxan warrior at my side. His words lingered in the air between them, and Kara's heart skipped a beat. Zunxan warrior. She had heard that word used to describe herself her entire life. But hearing it from him, the way he said it, like he admired her, it made her feel something she wasn't ready to acknowledge. As they reached the control room, Kara immediately took charge. She moved swiftly, pulling up holographic screens with the speed of someone who had done this 100 times before. Jake, however, wasn't standing idly by. He was at her side watching her work, offering help wherever he could. She glanced at him as he held a piece of equipment she had asked for, his brow furrowed in concentration. "Not bad, human," Kara said, her voice warmer now, softer than before. Jake looked up at her with a playful grin. "I'm full of surprises." Kara chuckled, but before she could respond, an explosion shook the ship, throwing both of them off balance. Kara immediately steadied herself, her eyes sharp and alert. Jake stumbled but caught himself just in time. He shot her a grin, though it was clear he was more than a little shaken. "Guess the surprises are coming faster than I thought," he said, trying to make light of the situation. Kara turned toward the screen in front of her, scanning for signs of the intruders. Her mind was already processing the data, but she couldn't help but notice Jake again. He was standing so close now, his presence constant, his energy mixing with hers in a way she hadn't expected. They worked together seamlessly, each anticipating the other's movements. As the ship rocked again, she found herself stepping closer to him without thinking. It was instinctual, an unconscious need to protect him that bubbled up inside her. She wasn't sure why it happened, but when Jake looked at her with those brown eyes, so full of warmth, she couldn't stop the pull. "You should be careful," Kara said, her voice low though her heart was pounding. "This could get dangerous." Jake smiled unfazed. "Danger's my middle name." Kara raised an eyebrow, amused but also a little touched by his courage. "Is it really?" Jake shrugged. "Not really, but it should be. I'd wear it proudly." She shook her head, fighting the grin that wanted to break free. The alarms were still blaring and time was running out, but Kara couldn't help the feeling that, for once, she wasn't completely alone in this. She had someone with her, someone who believed in her, someone who cared. As the situation on the ship escalated, they found themselves trapped in the heart of the control room. The intruders had breached the ship's defense systems, and Kara knew they had to act quickly if they were to save the crew and the ship itself. She stood, ready for whatever came next, but Jake was right there with her, his gaze steady, his posture ready for action. "You ready, human?" Kara asked, her voice firm as she activated the ship's defense systems. "I was born ready," Jake said with a grin, though she could see the nerves in his eyes. "Besides, I've got you." Kara's heart gave a funny twist at his words. "He's got me." She hadn't realized how much she needed to hear that until he said it. For all her strength, all her warrior training, there had always been a part of her that felt like she was carrying the weight of the universe alone. But now, with Jake beside her, maybe she didn't have to carry it all. They were a team, a real one. The first wave of intruders came rushing through the door, armed and ready. Kara moved in a blur of motion, dispatching the attackers with a swift, practiced strike. Jake, ever the quick learner, didn't hesitate either. He grabbed a weapon and joined the fight, his movements more fluid than ever before. For a moment it was chaos, lasers flying, people shouting, the sound of boots against metal floors. But Kara and Jake worked together with perfect synchronization. She covered his back and he kept an eye on her, making sure she didn't get overwhelmed. They were a force to be reckoned with. As the last of the intruders were dealt with, Kara stood, panting lightly, her chest heaving from the fight. She glanced over at Jake, who was breathing hard too but wearing a grin that made her pulse race. "Well, that wasn't so bad," Jake said, wiping a bead of sweat from his forehead. Kara raised an eyebrow, her lips curling into a smile despite herself. "You're insane, human." "I know," Jake said with a wink, "but it's fun, right?" Kara nodded, unable to hide the warmth spreading through her chest. "You're starting to grow on me." Jake's eyes softened, his grin fading just slightly. "I hope I'm more than just a fun distraction." For a brief moment, everything else faded away. There was just the two of them, standing in the heart of the ship, surrounded by chaos but somehow, in that moment, feeling like they were the only ones that mattered. "I'm glad you're here, Jake," Kara said quietly. Jake stepped closer, his voice serious now. "And I'm glad I'm here with you, Kara." And for the first time since they'd met, Kara felt like maybe, just maybe, she wasn't just a warrior. Maybe she was something more. And Jake was the one who made her feel that way. The aftermath of the attack left the ship buzzing with energy, its halls crowded with personnel scrambling to make repairs and assess the damage. But for Kara and Jake, the adrenaline from the fight hadn't quite worn off. They found themselves alone in one of the quieter corners of the ship, taking a moment to breathe. Kara leaned against the wall, her arms crossed, watching Jake as he wiped the sweat from his brow. His shirt was torn from the fight, and there were a few cuts and bruises along his arms, but he didn't seem bothered by it. Instead, he had that usual grin on his face, as if he were used to chaos. "That was unexpected," Jake said, his voice filled with humor. "I didn't think I'd be spending my first week on an alien ship fighting for my life." Kara couldn't help but chuckle. Most people would be screaming by now, "You're different." Jake turned toward her, his grin softening into something warmer. "What can I say? I'm just built different." She raised an eyebrow at him. "Is that so?" "Yep," Jake said, leaning closer, the playful edge in his voice still present. "You think I'd survive out here if I was?" Kara felt a sudden, unexplainable rush in her chest. The way he said it, the confidence he exuded, it made her want to laugh and punch him all at once. But it also made her feel something she couldn't shake. It was the same feeling she'd had when she first met him, an attraction, undeniable and strong, that she wasn't sure she could control. "I don't know, Jake," she said with a teasing smile. "I might have to disagree. You do seem like the type who could get himself into trouble without even trying." Jake's smile widened, and he took a step closer, his presence so much more intense now that they were near each other. "I think you underestimate me, Kara. I think you're starting to like it." Kara's heart skipped a beat, but she refused to let him see it. She crossed her arms tighter, trying to hide the fluttering inside her. "You're bold, human. Too bold." Jake shrugged, his eyes twinkling with mischief. "Maybe, but I've got to keep up with you, don't I?" His words hung in the air between them, and for a moment there was nothing else but the heat of his gaze. Kara's mind screamed at her to stay focused. "You're a warrior, Kara. You can't let your guard down. Not now, not ever." But there was something about him, the way he made her feel, alive and yet vulnerable at the same time. She had never been good at dealing with emotions. In her world, feelings didn't have room to take up space. But Jake made her question everything. Before she could respond, the sound of footsteps echoed down the hall, pulling them both out of the moment. A team of engineers appeared, rushing to fix the broken systems after the battle, but Kara could feel Jake's eyes still on her. "I'm not used to this," Kara said, her voice quieter now, her bravado slipping slightly. Jake tilted his head, his expression softening. "Used to what?" She looked away, unsure of how to put her feelings into words. "Used to feeling this way. You make everything feel different." Jake's grin faded and he took another step closer, his voice gentle. "I don't want to mess things up, Kara. I like being around you. A lot. More than I've ever liked anyone." Kara froze, her breath catching in her throat. It was one thing to flirt, to joke around, but hearing him say that, it was different. It made her feel exposed, like she was standing naked before him. She opened her mouth to say something, but the words didn't come. Jake seemed to sense her hesitation. "I know this is crazy. I'm a human and well, not, I get that, but that doesn't change how I feel." Kara's heart hammered in her chest. He feels the same way. She wanted to pull away, to retreat into the armor she'd built for herself over the years. But something inside her, a part of her that had long been buried, wanted to lean into it, wanted to feel what it was like to just let go. For the first time in a long while, she felt vulnerable, and to her surprise, she didn't mind it. I don't know how to do this, she admitted quietly, her voice shaky. I've never been good with emotions. I'm a warrior, Jake. I'm supposed to be strong. You are strong, Jake said, his voice filled with a softness she hadn't expected. But you don't have to do this alone, Kara. You don't have to be strong all the time. Not with me. She looked at him then, her heart in her throat. His words, they were so simple, yet they hit her harder than anything ever had before. She had always prided herself on her independence, on her strength. But with Jake, she didn't have to be all of those things. She didn't have to hide behind the warrior facade she'd built. Kara stepped back, her head spinning. This is all too fast, Jake. I don't know if I'm ready for whatever this is. Jake nodded slowly, understanding. I get it. I'm not going anywhere, Kara. Take your time. I'm not going to push you. I just want you to know that I'm here, whenever you're ready. His words, so sincere, sent a wave of warmth through her. She felt a flicker of something deeper, something real, that made her heart flutter. Kara swallowed, trying to find her voice again. I don't want to lose this, she said quietly, finally meeting his gaze. I don't want to lose you. Jake's face softened, and without saying a word, he stepped forward, closing the small distance between them. For a moment, everything else faded. The chaos of the ship, the looming dangers, the uncertainty of the universe, they all melted away. It was just Kara and Jake, just them. I'm not going anywhere, Jake whispered, and this time he didn't hold back. He leaned in, pressing a soft kiss to her forehead, as if reassuring her that everything would be okay. For the first time in a long time, Kara felt something she hadn't known she'd been missing, a sense of peace. And maybe, just maybe, she was ready to take that first step toward something she'd never dared to believe in before. Together, the days following the battle felt strangely calm. The ship hummed softly as it continued its journey through the stars, and Kara found herself distracted in ways she couldn't explain. For the first time since meeting Jake, she wasn't entirely focused on the mission. She couldn't help it. He was everywhere. His easy grin, his quiet moments when he stared out into the stars, the way he made her laugh when things got too serious. It was becoming harder to ignore the way her heart seemed to race whenever he was near. And as much as she tried to push it down, to focus on what she was supposed to do, there was no denying it anymore. She liked him. A lot. Kara leaned against the window, her eyes fixed on the endless stretch of space outside. The ship's smooth hum was a comforting sound, one that she'd grown used to over the years. But tonight, it felt different. Tonight, she was restless. From behind her, she heard the familiar sound of footsteps. Without turning around, she knew who it was. Can't sleep. Jake's voice was light, casual, but there was an undercurrent of concern that she couldn't ignore. Kara smiled slightly but didn't turn. I could ask you the same thing. Jake moved to stand beside her, his shoulder brushing against hers. She didn't pull away, even though she usually kept her distance. He was close, too close, and yet it felt right. I've been thinking, Jake said, his voice softer now, as if weighing his words carefully, about what we said earlier. Kara stiffened slightly but kept her gaze on the stars, trying to keep her emotions in check. Not this. Not now. She had just started to let her guard down, but the fear of what might happen if she let it go completely, if she let him in, was almost too much to bear. You don't have to, she replied, her voice firm. We don't have to talk about it, Jake. But Jake wouldn't be deterred. He turned to her, his expression serious, and gently touched her arm, making her flinch ever so slightly at the warmth of his hand. No, he said, his voice low but steady. I think we do need to talk about it. We've been through too much to pretend it doesn't matter. Kara's heart skipped a beat, and she finally turned to face him, her eyes locking with his. For a moment, the world around them seemed to disappear. The noise of the ship, the constant hum of the engines, all of it faded away, leaving only the two of them standing in the quiet of the control room. What do you mean? Kara asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Jake studied her, his eyes soft and understanding. I mean, I know this is hard for you. I know you're not used to letting people in, and I get it. You've been strong for so long for everyone. But you don't have to be strong all the time, not with me." Kara's breath caught in her throat. The sincerity in his voice struck her like a thunderclap. "Not with me." She swallowed, unsure of how to respond. She wasn't sure if she could let go of the walls she'd built around herself, those walls that had protected her, that had kept her safe from the world. Letting someone in, letting Jake in, felt terrifying. But with every glance, every word they shared, the walls felt less necessary. She felt herself wanting to let them crumble. "I've never," Kara began, her voice tight. She struggled to find the words. "I've never let anyone in like this before. Not like this, Jake. I've always been the one in control, the one who holds it together. I don't know how to do anything else." Jake gently reached for her hand, his touch tender but sure. "You don't have to do everything alone, Kara. You don't have to be the one holding everything together all the time. I'm here. I'm not going anywhere." She looked down at their joined hands, her heart racing. His words were so simple, but they held so much weight. He wasn't asking her to change, not really. He was asking her to trust him, to allow him to be part of her world. And for the first time in what felt like forever, Kara didn't feel the need to fight it. She looked back up at him, her chest tight with emotions she wasn't used to feeling. "But what if I mess it up? What if I let myself feel too much and I can't go back?" Jake stepped closer, his face only inches from hers. His eyes searched hers, looking for the words she couldn't quite find. "Then we'll figure it out together, Kara. We don't have to have all the answers right now. I don't need you to be perfect. I just need you to be you. With me." Kara's heart fluttered in her chest, and before she could stop herself, she found herself leaning into him, her breath coming a little faster. Jake didn't move away. Instead, he wrapped his arms around her, pulling her close, his warmth enveloping her. It felt like the world had finally paused, like, for just a moment, nothing else mattered but this. She had always thought that she had to be strong, that she had to be in control. But with Jake, she didn't feel weak for letting go. She felt free. "I don't know what's going to happen," Kara whispered, her voice barely audible. "But I know I don't want to lose this. I don't want to lose you." Jake smiled, his fingers gently threading through her hair. "You won't, Kara. I'm not going anywhere." The tenderness in his voice made her feel vulnerable, but also something else, something warm and certain, like she could trust him with her heart. Kara closed her eyes, leaning her forehead against his. The softness of his touch, the warmth of his embrace, it was more than she had ever dared to hope for, more than she had ever allowed herself to feel. And yet, here it was. In that quiet moment, she knew that whatever the future held, she wasn't going to face it alone. Not anymore. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. The stars outside the ship's windows twinkled like diamonds, a silent witness to the calm that had settled in the aftermath of the chaos. Kara stood by the observation deck again, her arms folded across her chest, her thoughts drifting to everything that had happened in the past few days. It was hard to believe how much had changed. She had been so focused on duty, on strength, on keeping her heart locked away for so long. But now, every time she thought of Jake, her chest tightened in a way that both scared and excited her. She could still feel the heat of his embrace from the night before, his gentle words echoing in her mind. "I'm not going anywhere, Kara. I'm here." It was a promise that had stuck with her, but there was still a part of her, always that part, wondering if she was making a mistake. She wasn't sure what it was about him that made her feel so alive. Was it the adventure, the risk, or was it something more? Kara was lost in her thoughts when she heard footsteps behind her. She didn't have to look to know who it was. It had become second nature, sensing when Jake was near. "You seem far away tonight." Jake's voice was light, teasing, but there was an underlying note of concern. Kara turned slowly, offering him a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Just thinking." Jake studied her for a moment before stepping closer, his grin widening as he noticed her distant expression. "About me," he asked with a wink. Kara rolled her eyes, a playful glint in her gaze. Always you, Jake. What else would I be thinking about? Jake's smile softened and his voice grew quieter. I'm glad you're here, Kara. You know that, right? Her heart gave a strange, unexpected flutter at the sincerity in his voice. There were no jokes, no distractions, just him and the honesty that she was starting to believe in. I know, Kara said softly, her gaze lowering to the floor. She hated how vulnerable she felt, how exposed he made her, but she also couldn't ignore the pull she felt toward him. But there's something I need to ask. Jake didn't hesitate. Anything. Kara took a deep breath. She had been avoiding this conversation for a while now, afraid of what it might reveal, but she knew she couldn't keep running from it. Not anymore. Why me, Jake? I don't get it. I'm not like you. I'm not like the others. I've spent my whole life thinking I had to be this way, strong, detached. And you're. Jake stepped closer, his hand resting on her shoulder, grounding her. And I'm what, Kara? Fragile, different. She nodded, her gaze fixed on his chest as if she couldn't look him in the eyes. I don't understand. You're human, and I've been told my whole life that humans were weak, small. But you're here, you're strong, and it feels like you've always been this way. How are you not afraid? Jake was quiet for a long moment, his thumb gently rubbing her arm, a simple gesture that seemed to calm the storm inside her. Then he spoke, his voice low and sincere. I'm afraid, Kara, every day, but I don't let it control me. We all have our fears, don't we? It's not about being fearless. It's about doing the things that matter even if we're scared. Her eyes finally met his, and for the first time she saw a rawness in him that made her heart ache. I've always been afraid, Kara admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Afraid of being weak, afraid of letting people in. I thought if I kept fighting, kept being the strongest, I wouldn't have to face it. Jake's hand moved from her arm to her cheek, his fingers brushing her skin gently. You're not weak, Kara, and you're not alone anymore. You don't have to keep running from what you feel. You don't have to fight everything by yourself. Kara closed her eyes at his touch, leaning into it instinctively. She wanted to fight it, wanted to push him away, but everything about him, his warmth, his honesty, his patience, made it hard. So much harder than she'd ever imagined. I don't know how to do this, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. I don't know how to let someone in, Jake. Jake didn't answer immediately, instead taking her hand in his and leading her over to the window where the stars shone brightly outside. They stood side by side, the silence between them comfortable, familiar. It was as if the universe itself was holding its breath, waiting for what would come next. You don't have to do anything, Jake said, breaking the silence. We'll figure this out together, but you have to trust me, Kara. Trust that you're not alone. Trust that I'm here and I'm not going anywhere. Kara's chest tightened at his words, and she found herself unable to speak for a moment. How could he say that? How could he be so sure? Her voice cracked when she finally found the words. But I am alone. I've always been alone. I don't know how to stop being that way. Jake gently pulled her into him, his arms wrapping around her in a comforting, protective embrace. Not anymore, he murmured, his voice soothing. You don't have to be alone, Kara. I'm here, and I always will be. Kara closed her eyes, letting herself sink into the warmth of his embrace. For the first time, she let herself believe him. She let herself believe in them. In that moment, it didn't matter that she was Zunxin and he was human. It didn't matter that the universe had thrown them into chaos or that they were constantly fighting for survival. What mattered was that she wasn't alone anymore. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. Okay, she whispered, her voice small but steady. Okay, Jake, I'll try, I'll trust you. Jake's hands cupped her face, lifting her chin gently so their eyes met. His expression was full of warmth, of hope, and something more, a deep, unspoken promise that resonated between them. I'm glad, he said, his voice low and sincere, because I've never been more sure of anything in my life. And as they stood there together, Kara knew that no matter what the future held, No matter how dangerous or uncertain their path might be, she wouldn't face it alone. Not with Jake by her side. The ship was on high alert. The hum of its engines had changed, and the walls vibrated with the tension of impending danger. Kara felt it in her bones. This was no longer just a simple mission. This was real. This was life or death. She paced back and forth in the control room, her fingers running over the edges of the console as she processed the incoming data. The alarms were blaring, the red lights flashing ominously, and yet, despite all the chaos, she was calm. She had to be. She was a warrior. But Jake wasn't a warrior. He was a human. And though she knew he was strong in his own way, the thought of him out there in the thick of battle, where danger was inevitable, made her stomach twist with worry. She wasn't used to this, feeling so connected to someone so vulnerable. But with Jake, everything was different. He had become her anchor, the one person who had wormed his way into the deepest parts of her heart. She couldn't let him go into this battle without knowing how much he meant to her. Kara. The sound of his voice pulled her from her thoughts. She turned to find Jake standing in the doorway, his expression a mix of determination and concern. "I'm ready," he said, his eyes locking onto hers with a fierce intensity. She felt her heart skip a beat. This was it, the moment they had been preparing for. And yet, with him standing there, his rugged figure bathed in the flickering light of the emergency alerts, she realized just how much she didn't want to face it, not without him by her side. "You shouldn't go out there," she said, her voice softer than she intended, a quiet plea hiding behind the strength in her words. "It's too dangerous." Jake didn't hesitate. "I've faced danger my whole life, Kara. I'm not about to back down now, not with you here." Her chest tightened, a mix of fear and affection swelling inside her. He's not afraid. But then she remembered, he wasn't just a fighter, not in the way she was. He had no training, no backup, and no idea of what it truly meant to face death on the battlefield. "You don't have to do this," Kara repeated, stepping closer, her voice softer now. "I don't want you to get hurt. I can't." "Kara," Jake cut her off gently, taking a step forward. "I'm not leaving you. I never will. But I'm not going to let you do this alone." She looked up at him, her heart fluttering. In that moment, the intensity between them was undeniable. The ship could be falling apart around them, and yet, all she could focus on was Jake's unwavering determination. He was standing right here, and in his eyes, she could see something. Something that made her believe they could do anything, as long as they were together. "You're not alone, either," he added, his voice a steady anchor. "We're in this together, always." Kara felt something inside her break free. A wall she hadn't realized she'd built was crumbling. The fear, the hesitation, all of it seemed to dissolve in the face of Jake's words. For the first time she understood. She wasn't alone. She didn't have to face the world by herself. Not anymore. "You're right," she said quietly, a slow smile spreading across her face. "Let's do this, together." With a final, lingering look, Jake nodded. Without another word, they moved out of the control room, heading toward the battle stations. As they walked side by side, the weight of their connection hung in the air. Kara had never felt more sure of anything in her life. They could take on anything together. The battle was fierce. The enemy was unlike anything they had faced before, fast, merciless, and deadly. Kara fought with the precision of a seasoned warrior, her movements swift and fluid as she took down one enemy after another. Jake was beside her, his own weapon in hand, doing his best to keep up. Though he was out of his element, there was something about him, something in the way he never hesitated, the way he protected her without even thinking, that made her believe in him even more. "Watch your back," Kara shouted as an enemy appeared behind him, but Jake was already a step ahead, his movements sharp and quick. Together, they worked as a perfect team, Kara taking the front, Jake covering her from the rear. They fought side by side, never once questioning each other's commitment. They had been through too much to ever doubt their bond. The sounds of battle were deafening, but in the chaos, there was clarity. In that moment, they were unstoppable. Not bad for a human, Kara teased as they took down another wave of enemies, both of them panting from the effort. Jake shot her a grin, sweat dripping down his face. Told you, I'm full of surprises. Kara couldn't stop the laugh that bubbled up from her chest. The sound was rare, one she hadn't let herself make in a long time, but here, with Jake, it felt natural. As they moved deeper into the enemy's base, the odds seemed stacked against them, but they didn't stop. They couldn't. Finally, they reached the heart of the enemy's stronghold, where the final battle awaited them. A massive, towering figure stood in their way, an alien warrior unlike any they had faced. Kara gripped her weapon, ready for what was to come, but before she could strike, Jake stepped forward. "I've got this," he said, his voice steady, unwavering. Kara stared at him, heart in her throat. "Jake, no." "I've been fighting for you, Kara," he said, cutting her off gently. "Now I'm fighting for us." Without waiting for a response, Jake lunged forward, the battle between him and the alien warrior brutal and fast. Kara watched, her heart racing as Jake fought with every ounce of strength in him. But this wasn't just about physical power, it was about something deeper. The way he never gave up, no matter how strong the odds seemed. In a final, heroic move, Jake struck the alien warrior down, sending it crashing to the ground. He stood there, panting heavily, his body bruised but victorious. Kara ran to him, her heart in her throat. "You did it," she whispered, her voice full of awe. Jake smiled, his hand finding hers, his touch warm and familiar. "We did it," he corrected, his voice soft and full of meaning. "Together." And in that moment, Kara knew that no matter what the universe threw at them, no matter the battles they'd face, she would always have him by her side. And with him, she could face anything. Together,